Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are very excited to be talking to you in person, together, for the first time in the history of this podcast, which is awesome. Today, we are very excited to be talking to you about Sam Raimi's film, Drag Me to Hell.
I gotta bring up my synopsis again.
Yes. Chris is going to bring up his synopsis now,
right,
so we can do that.
All right. So Drag Me to Hell, it's a 2009 film, as we said, directed by Sam Raimi. And it stars Alison, Lohman, Justin Long, your friend Dilip Rao. So here is the synopsis. Christine Brown, Alison Lohman, has a loving boyfriend, Justin Long, and a great job at a Los Angeles bank. But her heavenly life becomes hellish when, in an effort to impress her boss, she denies an old woman's request for an extension on her home loan. In retaliation, the woman places a curse on Christine, threatening her soul with eternal damnation. Christine seeks a psychic's help to break the curse. I guess he's a psychic. But the price to save her soul may be more than she can pay.
All right, so I have a couple of quibbles with that. First of all, the old woman comes in and it's a third extension.
Yes, three times.
And Christine, I mean, obviously there's more to this, but Christine denies the third extension.
Is this a Bible thing? It's like Jesus has been
the third extension on his
third.
mortgage.
The cock crows three times.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know the answer to this. I didn't think it was fair what happened to Christine.
No.
She was professional and she was nice.
Mm-hmm.
This woman was over the top, very aggressive. And we went from denying the bank loan to cursing you to eternal damnation pretty fast. I don't think anything that Christine did merited that. Mm-hmm. For those of you new to the podcast, we spoil these movies. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to find out what happens at the end all the way through, then please come back to us after you have watched the movie.
What's it on? What did you watch it on? Prime?
Showtime. I think
it's on
Showtime.
Yeah, you can watch it on Showtime. So we're gonna find out.
You can rent it on other things, but if you're a subscriber already,
it's on Showtime. So we'll find out the end how unfair maybe this all really was. But so you had not seen this.
I had not seen it, and I just thought it was a jolly good, romping. No, can't do that right now. Sorry, folks. Can't do that right now. Getting a call. So, yes, I had not seen it. I watched it. Unfortunately, I had to watch it on an iPhone because I had connectivity problems. So that was the best I could do. I managed to get it downloaded to my device, and then I watched it. So not optimal, although I did get all the sound design because I had these noise canceling earphones in, which it sounds great. There's lots of like squishy, squelchy. There's a lot of Sam Raimi splat fun going on in this movie, and the sound design, you could just see that did you ever see the like featurette of Lord of the Rings where they talk about designing that one orc general that has a face that looks just like an overgrown tumor, and the guy's like, we designed it, and Peter Jackson came in and was looking at it and just like took a big wad of clay and slapped it on the side of the head. More like that. You know, that's what it felt like they did to the sound design. It was like, oh, the part where the eyeballs shoot out of the head sounds like this. And he was like, no, like this. So the sound design is a hoot. And I could see it well enough to know that there's a lot of that going on visually too, but I didn't get the full screen effect of it. But I super enjoyed it. I think Sam Raimi is my sweet spot for horror because it's fun.
Right. It's
still scary and it's still sometimes kind of gross, but it isn't. And it's occasionally sadistic things happen. There's evil is gleeful in Sam Raimi's movies.
Right.
And bad things happen to good people, but overall the movie stays fun. It feels like your kids playing with makeup and paints, and you get to really go in there with your imagination and be scared and have fun. But it didn't like leave scars on my soul.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have nightmares about this movie.
There's a theory that people have with horror that the older you get, as when you're 20 years old or whatever, you're 16 and you're watching horror movies, you're going to live forever, right? So you get to a point in your life where you're aware of your own mortality. And it's like, I don't know if I want to see movies where, people are dying in horrible ways and things like that. So I definitely know, being a lifelong horror movie, I'm definitely more drawn to, and I always like the fun stuff, but the really dark stuff I have a hard time with.
Yes.
Now, so I'm looking for fun horror, and this is fun horror. And one thing that I really like about this, it's similar to Malignant. Not that the movies are similar, but it's in a similar way to Malignant that came out a few weeks ago. So that was James Wan. James Wan was a guy who started with Saw. I don't like the Saw movies, but he started with Saw, did some other horror stuff, and then he moved on to The Fast and the Furious, and then he did Aquaman. But he came back and did Malignant. And a quote from him was, you can take the boy out of the horror, but you can't take the horror out of the boy. And a lot of times, because horror is cheap to do typically and all that, and it's kind of, society a lot of ways views it like one step above pornography. People start out in it and then they get to real movies and then they never come back to it. James Wan came back regardless of what people think about the movie Malignant. He came, it was like, I've made all this billions of dollars for the studios, and now this is the movie that I want to make, and I'm going to make it. And Sam Raimi did the same thing. Started out with Evil Dead, went to Spider-Man, and did a Wizard of Oz movie and all this kind of stuff. And then decided to come back and do a horror movie with I would imagine, a fairly significant, this isn't like a $200 million movie, but probably had a decent budget. So I think that's really cool that Sam Raimi wasn't like, I'm too good for horror now. I've done 3 Spider-Man movies. Like,
right.
The hell with that.
And
he came back.
Some of the effects look pretty CGI.
Yeah, there's some. That's my only criticism of this movie, is there's some wonky CG.
But that didn't bother me either, any more than campy practical effects bothered me, because again, it was all part of the fun for me. Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple that look kind of splatted in later and like on the cheap. It still tells the story. It still conveys the of it, and it felt very like I didn't. Some of the stuff is so over the top that if you had really spent added another 0 or 2 to the CGI, it wouldn't have appreciably changed the.
No,
some of the stuff is gross in the way that opening a can of peanut brittle and a snake pops out is like, it's not that the snake is realistic. It's just like, it's the shock of it.
Sure.
So that didn't stick in my craw. I did think I felt bad for Christine. I liked Christine, and I was rooting for her. And there's a twist at the end where you think she's going to come out on top, and there's the twist. There's no, and you see it coming. But I still don't think it's fair. I think it would have been more fun, frankly. I know I'm skipping ahead here. It would have been more fun to have her succeed in her final
And that's
game.
The interesting. So, spoiler alert, she is dragged to hell at the end. That's literally the closing shot of her, is her being dragged to hell.
Dragged to hell.
What? And it definitely feels unfair. And for this movie that is fun all along,
I know you want to have.
It's a pretty dark ending. What do you think? What do you think maybe Sam Raimi or the I don't think he was the screenwriter, but the screenwriter was trying to. That was something that I thought a lot about this second time. So I watched it last night. This was the second time I'd seen it. I saw it in the theater when it originally came out, and then watched it the second time. So what do you think was there any kind of a message there that it's just sort of like, she's not a bad person, but
just that evil doesn't allow for, evil
doesn't matter if you're
doesn't, you don't always get a happy ending.
Yeah.
Just because you want, it's a movie and you like it. But So I get it as a storyteller. I get it as having that bitter twist of the knife where you call the shot in the beginning and there's an exciting game, and then at the end it comes true. But I'd say as a filmmaker who is trying to, I think as a filmmaker, you don't want to set out to please the audience because that undermines what it is you're trying to do. At the same time, if you lose the audience, you absolutely undermine what you're trying to do, right? So if you make a movie that it can be well shot and well acted and everything, but it can be so brutal as to be unwatchable, you've made a movie that is unwatchable, right? So what's the purpose of a movie that is so masterfully unwatchable that you can't watch it?
Yeah.
And that's not the case here, of course. But it's a little bit like you set up a super likable character and a super likable couple, and an instigating event in which the antagonist, like, she is cursed to hell unfairly.
Yes.
She doesn't deserve that, right? So from the very beginning, you're rooting for her to get out of it because that is punishment totally disproportionate to the crime. And so we're rooting for her to figure out a way to kind of avoid that fate. And then you give us the little cookie of like, oh, she did it, phew, and then you take that away from us, and that's and then credits. It does feel a little bit like flipping the last thing is flipping the bird to the audience.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? That's so easy a thing to give us at the end. And you can have yet another big, crazy scene where the spirits somehow come and drag the old woman's, right? I mean, you could make it righteously satisfying at the end and have it be exactly the same movie except for that final scene.
Yeah, it's interesting because I imagine, this would have been, Raimi rather would have been coming off the 3 Spider-Man films. I don't remember when Spider-Man 3 was exactly, but he would have had a lot of clout at this time because those movies made a ton of money.
And maybe he was a little rankling from, I'm sure in that process, he had to take a lot of feedback from the studios.
Oh, I'm sure.
So it's like, oh, you can't do that. You have to do this. And he's like, but that's not. And they're like, do it.
And I'm sure with this, he was able to just do whatever he wanted to.
Make it end however I want.
And get his ending. Because it's a little bit interesting because you would think like this, the studio would have been like, well, let's have a happy ending. And I'm sure he was just like, hey, this is my ending. This is what I'm going to do.
Movie,
but through, you have the ending feels very unfair, but throughout the movie, I was watching it. There's a scene where she meets his parents for the first time. So her and Justin Long are dating, and he's from this really wealthy family, and she grew up on a farm. And the mother in particular doesn't feel, there's one scene where she goes to see him. He's a college professor, and she goes to see him. And as she's leaving, he gets a call from his mother, and he has her on speakerphone, and he doesn't know that she can hear. But the mother's saying like, oh, she's from a farm. Can't you do better?
She's not good enough for you.
Yeah, she's not good enough for you.
Grow up and see someone who's taking life seriously.
So she goes, they go to dinner at the parents' house, and they live in this big mansion in Los Angeles. And she kind of wins them over initially. And then at dinner, so there's all these things throughout the film where the demon kind of plays with her and toys with her and causes her to have hallucinations and these things. And she thinks there's an eye, as she hallucinates or whatever, that there's an eyeball in her cake and all this. And she freaks out. And did I'm watching that and like you're cringing, like you're thinking like, wow, how horrible it would be to be in that situation. Was that real cringy for you? Or you just you just feel so bad for her,
I hated it because I loved that she had finally won the parents over.
Yeah.
Like she and the boy are such a sweet couple, and they're genuinely nice, and you want
and in
them,
love with each other.
and the parents and the mom's kind of a ball breaker, but she comes around, and everything in this movie is painted in broad strokes. The bank manager is a little bit like, well, it's really, I'm still deciding, but it's really down to you and the new guy. And, I need somebody who can make the tough decisions. So it's all very almost allegorical in the way it's painted. And the mom is like, oh, shouldn't you be dating a woman who's serious about her? Isn't it time for you to?
She works in a bank.
It's all kind of these archetypal cliches. And the things change very fast too. So like, the bank manager asks her to take this big, thick file of bank stuff she's been working on. Will you take it home and finish it for me? Because I want to show it to the regional directors. They're going to love this. And then the other guy sneaks in and steals it somehow and takes it to a rival bank. I mean, none of it really makes any sense.
No.
But it's like a kid would think about like, oh, you stole the contract. Well, I'm not going to let you get away with that. And so when it's working and she says, something about your dad. Well, where was your dad? We grew up without your dad. And she says he was an alcoholic. There's this moment of silence where
you're just like, oh no.
You think, oh, that's not that's not what you're supposed to say at dinner with these fancy parents. But then, the mom says, speaking of alcoholics, the mom says, it's nothing to be ashamed of. My father was an alcoholic, and I actually admire you.
You're so brave.
Your bravery to say that. I never had the courage to admit it myself. And that's just like that on a dime, the whole scene turns, and then they're chatting and laughing. Oh, they love the cake. And, she brings this kind of like homely looking cake and they think it tastes great. And you're just kind of like,
something good is going to happen.
Yes, this is terrific because she is a good kid. She's sweet and nice and deserves this. But it's taken away from her. And it's a hard scene to watch because you're like...
It is, yeah. I have a hard time.
Come on, man. That's not cool.
And Alison Lohman, the lead, is great. And she... I was reading on IMDb around a year or so after this, she basically retired.
Yeah, that's curious.
And
what happened?
I thought she was great. She acted a little bit, but I don't know. And I think the performances across the board are good in this. So Justin Long is Justin Long. He's basically playing the role that he always plays. He's great. The old woman is fantastic. The bank manager guy is great. Her rival at the bank is really good. The psychic or whatever he is, he's great. So yeah.
It's rollicking good fun. And I think if you're a Sam Raimi fan, it's a slam dunk. But so is it just that you have to do 3 or 4 big company pictures before you get the right to make the one you want to make? Or
I guess, I don't know. To me, that's a cool thing that actors do. I don't know how much anymore I would say this because it seems like he kind of only does big things. But Brad Pitt was like that for a while, where it felt like he would do these big studio movies, a couple of them, so he could do some little movie.
Yeah.
I was just reading this today about Ben Affleck, that he's in the new. They're making a Flash movie, and he's in it.
That's Batman.
It's like a multiverse thing where he's one Batman, and then Michael Keaton is in it as well as a Batman.
A couple of Batman.
And Ben Affleck was saying how much fun he had working on it because kind of famously they didn't have fun working on Justice League. That was supposed to be like a really bad set. But I was reading some comments of it and people were saying like, it kind of seems as if Ben Affleck did these Batman movies so he could just kind of do the other movies that he really wants to do, to direct and everything. So I think that's a cool thing that directors do. And Sam Raimi is continuing, they did the Ash versus Evil Dead show, which I don't know if you watched any of that or not.
It's great.
Yeah. They did the new Evil Dead, the movie. Did you ever see that?
No.
That's one that was around this time. That's one that we might have to watch.
It's just a remake.
Kind of, yeah. But Ash is not in it. There's a female character in place of him. But Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, produced it and everything. So, they were involved with it. And they are in production now on another Evil Dead movie, which I don't know what it's going to be. I think it's going to be like in a city instead of being, a cabin in the woods or whatever. But I think it's cool that he has continued to come back to this kind of where his roots were.
Yeah.
Um,
There's such great attitude in this movie that harkens back to those original Evil Dead. Evil is relentless and it's gleeful and sadistic, but like there's the fight in the parking lot. The woman is denied the bank loan, feels that the young woman has humiliated her, and so waits for her in the back of her car in the parking garage to kill her, right? I mean, why do you break into somebody's car and sit in the back seat in the dark? Then they get into a tussle and she almost kills her. And, there's a number of, they kick him out of the car and there's a lot of like head smashing the steering wheel and stuff like that. But there's a moment, pardon, I'm going to use the B word here for a second, but there's a moment after a particularly vicious scuffle where she, kicks the old woman. She goes flying out and hits her head on the thing. And she goes, "Yeah, I beat you, old bitch." And it's a laugh out loud moment of like, yeah!
Because she's such a sweet girl.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of moments throughout that are like when they have the seance and the demon is in the real world and then it gets out of the goat and it gets into the guy and the guy is hovering in midair and there's sort of everything's on fire.
That's very Evil Dead.
And he's sort of dancing this little jig in midair like, I'm going to get all your soul.
And they basically even do the Evil Dead voice, that the Deadites would have.
Yes, the cackling. And so that tone is all throughout this. And I think if you're a Raimi fan, you'll love this movie because it feels true to all that voice. We did Tim Burton and we talked about, in the later movies, it's all still the striped socks and the curlicue trees, but it just seemed some of the pepper went out of it. It didn't feel like it had the kind of electricity or the freshness isn't the strong enough word, but it didn't just have that.
Yeah, I know. It seemed like once Tim Burton got into CG, it like kind of ruined things.
Yeah. But this does. I guess I brought that up to say this is a filmmaker that did go back to his universe of this is what horror is and this is what evil looks like. And there's another side of the veil. And on that side of the veil, he has a very specific vision of what those demons and every Deadites or whatever are like.
Yeah.
And they can sneak across the veil and possess people and things. And that is just as clear and sharp. And I mean, I keep saying gleeful, but that's the word. That's what makes it so fun to watch this. You're not rooting for the bad guys.
No.
But you can almost see him with the camera as he's shooting these scenes being like, and it's infectious.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have another thing that I really liked about this, you have a lot of classic horror elements that to me, I'm a sucker for in any movie. There's leaves blowing around and there's lightning. And there's a great scene where she goes to, I won't say exactly what happens, but she goes to, so the old woman the old woman that curses her dies. And she finds out
that she goes to beg for the granddaughter lets her in, and it's the wake for the old woman. The woman has died.
And the woman.
So you're like, uh-oh.
So the scene that I was actually going to talk about is so finally she goes to this psychic guy or whatever who's kind of guiding her through how to battle this demon that is going to possess her or drag her to hell in 3 days. And the woman had taken a button off of her coat and uses that to curse her. So the guy says, well, you can give that object to somebody else. And so she says, "Can I give it to somebody who's dead?" And he's like, "Well, he looks through the books and everything." It's like, maybe.
That's one of the things I like is that he doesn't know. She comes back and
Yeah.
says, "I thought you said whatever," and he's like, "Dude, I don't know."
Yeah,
Like, this is crazy. This is crazy stuff.
Not set in stone or anything. So she determines that she could give the button back. She could give the button to the old woman.
Worth a try, right?
So she goes, and there's a great scene where she goes and digs her up, and of course it's a rainstorm, and there's all there's actually a scene where one of the big cross like falls on her and knocks her unconscious. Yeah. So you have all those great horror elements of the rain and the lightning and all that. And I just love that.
And a lot of so when she goes to the wake, there's sort of a stumble, and the corpse is almost alive, like an Indiana Jones, and getting out of the crypt. There's all the sort of corpses that are like, oh, and they're sort of all like dog piling on her, and they seem animate.
Mm-hmm.
And this, without the corpse coming to life, mm-hmm. there's a lot of that where it almost seems like this dead body of the old mm-hmm. woman is, and there's some like kind of embalming fluid or something coming out of her. It's really gross. And then she's also having hallucinations. So there's one where near the end of the curse, when things are getting really vivid, the old woman shows up to her and shoves her arm down her throat. Mm-hmm. Remember that? She's like, and she does a thing where she hauls it's a chandelier or some kind of an anvil and drops it on the
it's an anvil. It's a big she just happens to have an anvil in her garage,
flying down, and it smashes the old woman in her head, whose eyeballs fly out and hit her in the face,
which is kind of a bad CG thing.
And then a bunch of blood or whatever comes out of her mouth and kind of bukakis all over her face too.
That's a great verb.
There's no escaping it. And again, in a movie in which you establish a wicked person doing a wicked thing, and this is the comeuppance of the wicked person, then even if they manage to turn it around so you start rooting for the wicked person, you think, oh, come on, this person they're genuinely sorry. They deserve a second chance. You can kind of get on board with the comeuppance. In mm-hmm. this one, she's a sweet person that you like the whole way through, who makes she could have maybe done the nicer thing and granted this awful woman a third extension on the right for no reason other than she's a nice person and she's being punished because she wasn't.
But she was kind of a victim of circumstance because she has to do it because she's trying to get this promotion,
Kind of. There's a lot of pressure on her.
Yeah. Too. It's not that she's a bad person or anything.
No, so it feels like when there's all this kind of extra blah heaped on her that you're kind of like, it's interesting. It's interesting choice because she is of, there's a lot of horror movies in which the lead is a pretty young, blonde woman, white woman. Mm-hmm. And they vary in terms of, why bad things are happening to this person. And this one stands out to me as she is genuinely sweet and you're genuinely rooting for her the whole mm-hmm. time. And there's no, I know what you did last summer, or there's no catch.
Yeah.
She
didn't
doesn't deserve this.
Right.
And that's the only thing I didn't like about this movie, because I thought, have we already talked about the ending?
I mean, we did the time we were recording, but
the second take of this.
So let's talk about the ending.
Yeah. So at the end, she thinks that there's a couple of ways she might get out of this. The first thing she tries is, if you sacrifice an animal, maybe you can appease the demon coming after you. So there's a kitty that
that was the only thing that maybe might lose the audience a little bit, is you don't see it on screen, but she sacrifices her cat.
Right. And the cat didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then so temporarily she thinks that works, but then it didn't. So there's a number of maybe this and then not that. Oh, maybe this new thing. Well, no, it doesn't. And then the next thing is that, I guess the first thing is she goes and tries to get forgiveness for the old lady. The old lady's dead. The second mm-hmm. thing is, well, maybe you can make a blood sacrifice, and that doesn't work. And then the third thing, is there third thing before the button?
The third thing is they're going to put the demon into the goat.
Oh, yes.
And sacrifice the goat.
We can summon the demon into our world and then slip it into another host and kill the host. So they have a goat, and the woman, the seer, they find is going to inhabit the demon, and then she says, "Take my hand
and this is a
put it on
really
the
great
goat."
scene.
Yes, it's a great scene. And it's working, except it doesn't work ultimately. And they managed to get the demon back out of their realm, but they didn't kill it. So the last Hail Mary thing that her friend, the seer or the fortune teller, psychic, says is, well, you could pass the cursed object, the button from your coat. You could pass ownership of that to somebody else. You can give the curse to somebody else, basically, and save yourself. Because the demon comes for the owner of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, why didn't you tell me this sooner? And he said, because think about it. That's heavy. Like, maybe it's not fair that she damned you to hell, but now you're going to put that on somebody else? Like,
yeah.
And I really like that moment, because it's like, that's a heavy thing, man. Who are you going to give it to?
Yeah, think about that you would.
You're basically doing to somebody else what she
You're going to kill somebody, Yeah.
Yeah, but not just that, the torment and everything. Mm-hmm. It's like, so she wrestles with that for a while, and then she says, could I give it to somebody? Do they have to be alive? And he was like, I don't know. And he kind of looks it up and he thinks about it, and he's kind of like, it doesn't say anything about them not. I mean, the soul never dies. So, yeah, I mean, you have to formally transfer ownership, but yeah, I think that'll work. So she goes and digs the old woman up.
Yeah, that was that scene that we were talking about where, she's in where it's raining
in
and there's the lightning and all that stuff. Yeah, I love that scene.
And there's basically a fight scene with a corpse. Like, it's just this crazy.
You know what? That reminded me, I don't know if this was intentional, but it reminded me of Poltergeist, when the mom is in the pool. I don't know how well you remember Poltergeist, but in the pool with the corpses, it made me think of that. I don't know if they were trying to evoke that or not, but it felt like that scene.
And so she has this envelope, and it's a classic, like,
switcheroo.
She takes the button and puts it in, seals it in an envelope, and she's got the envelope, and then her boyfriend's driving
her
somewhere.
Boyfriend collects coins.
Steps on
she's gotten a coin for him from the bank. It's some rare, coin, which has also been in an envelope. So they can.
And there's step on the brakes. She almost hit that guy. Whoa, that was close. And all the papers go on the floor. Mm-hmm. But then, so here it is. Thank goodness. Oh, where's my envelope? I can't find it. She finds it. Well, of course, it's the wrong envelope. Of course. Mm-hmm. But she manages to stuff what we later discover is the wrong envelope into the old woman's corpse's mouth. And she gets out, and the next day comes, and she isn't dragged to hell, and we have a happy ending.
We're going to have the happy ending.
There's sunshine.
They're going to go on the train to what, Santa Monica?
Yep. The boyfriend comes and gets her, and it's like, I feel so much better. Everything.
She buys a new coat that she sees in the window of the train station.
Yeah, happy ending. It's right out of the monkeys. So, and then he's like, I think you might have had a switcheroo, and he pulls the envelope.
Oh, he says, she's like, I got a new coat. And he goes, oh, you did? And she goes, I'm not going to wear that old coat anymore where the button. And he was like, oh, really? Because I have the
found your button.
You. And
it's like, bomb,
and it's great where
wax focus, right?
Well, and it's great where it's like, almost as if it would really happen to you, as it starts, like the sound gets all muffled.
Yeah.
It's from her point of view. It's like she almost can't even hear what he's saying anymore. Yeah. It's like, oh, I can't believe this is,
And it's super well done. You just don't. And then there's a train coming, and what does she fall into the train track?
She falls onto the train track.
There's a train coming, and the earth cracks open, and
cracks open. There's the flames and everything, and she gets pulled in, and that's the closing. He's crying.
Credits, and he witnesses it, so he sees that it's real.
So it's real. It's not in her head or anything.
And credits, and then you think
this was unfair. So it's for a movie that is fun, and I would say. So the tone of this movie, we've talked a lot about the crazy stuff and everything. I would not really necessarily describe this as a horror comedy. This isn't Shaun of the Dead. It's
that to me was a comedy
with horror
by guys who loved horror movies,
right?
And so they superimposed some horror elements over what was fundamentally a comedy by comedians.
Right. This is, I feel, when we didn't really talk about this, so let's backtrack a little bit. There are some great scenes with her being tormented by the demon. There's a great scene in her. Well, there's a lot of throughout the movie. There are a lot of scenes where you and Raimi does a great job. You never really see the demon in full. You see shadows of it whipping around her windows,
Sort of goat horns.
and there's a lot
hooves.
we talked about the sound design where she can hear it coming, like, towards her house. There's a great scene where as I get like excited, my voice gets higher, so I'm trying to not sound too high. So there's a great scene where you can see the shadow of the demon coming up her staircase. You just see like its horns and things, just the shadow, and you can hear it, its hooves, going up the stairs. And she goes and locks herself in the bedroom, and you see that, it's kind of funny where it's just like, and then you see the shadow of the hands.
The shadow kind of becomes
under.
Hands that reach.
All of that is great, but I would say this is to me, this is horror first, with funny things in it. And it's interesting. This movie is, I don't know if beloved is the right term, but it has a 92% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And overall, I think this is a movie that kind of horror fans in general really liked. I think people who are Evil Dead fans, this is more... The first Evil Dead to me has always been, I've always viewed it as, it's a scary movie. It's just a horror movie. And then the second one is basically a remake of the first with humor in it. This feels like the kind of funny elements feel like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. You have those, Raimi is definitely kind of tying those things into it. But it's played pretty serious, except for some goofy stuff.
It seems like he wants his horror to be scary, genuinely scary, and fun in all the ways that horror is fun. Like, really land those things. But
it's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, but I guess I just said it. But
you're not going to watch this and be scarred.
Like a fun movie. Like, it's still... You like to go to the movies and maybe see some gross splat stuff.
This isn't The Exorcist where you're going to,
no,
lie awake at night after you watch this.
It's not really toying with big existential. It's a movie. It's a popcorn movie, and it's setting out to scare you in a way that you could have fun on a date. But be really scared.
Let me ask you a question. So I'm definitely more the horror fan of the show. I mean, you like some horror stuff, but if we hadn't have done this for the podcast, do you think you would have watched this movie? What did you think, just like based on the cover and all that? Did you think this was like a real scary film? Or
I had forgotten it was Sam Raimi, frankly, and I think that would have tipped it for me. But I do know Dilip Rao. We went to graduate school together, and we're friends. We're not like, I mean, I think we're friends on Facebook, but we're not like buds who hang out. Although, hey, if you're in town, I like him. And so I had been sort of meaning, I'm like, oh, I got to check that out, because I've had people be like, oh, it's great. He's great in that, and and I do try and watch. If there's a movie that somebody I know is in, I'm like, yeah, I want to see. I want to see that, because I want to see him do good stuff. And, but I hadn't gotten around to it. So when you recommended it, I was psyched. I was like, oh, but this is perfect. Because it's one of those things like, oh, I've been meaning to do that. And you just kind of never get around to it. It's not
Dune was very much like
that. It's not my
for
go-to genre.
Dune was very much like that for me. I've always wanted to watch Dune, but I was a little bit intimidated by it because I'd never read the books, and all that. Yeah. And like when we talked about it for the show, that was perfect, because it's like, oh, this finally gives me an excuse to watch this.
It's interesting. And then I liked it, going into the new Dune too with Denis Villeneuve, because you have not read the books,
right?
And with David Lynch's Dune and the property in general, I mean, I think that this upcoming movie will not require you. A good movie shouldn't require you to have read the books.
Right.
But certainly with David Lynch's Dune, so much of it is just sort of visual and design, and that if you read the books, you read at least the first book, the book Dune. I think you're at a distinct advantage in terms of like understanding what is going on.
Right.
Because the book is very
dense.
Yeah. And the movie is 2 hours, and they have to tell a story that fits the arc that makes a satisfying movie. So you don't get into all the like, you don't spend a lot of time in House Harkonnen. It's only when it relates to the plot of the Atreides and so forth. So
a friend has already seen we're kind of digressing a little bit, but a friend has already seen the new Dune because it's out in other countries. And he read, it was kind of funny. He read some of the book, and he said basically exactly where he finished in the book is where the movie finishes. But he said he liked the book because there was a lot of description, or he liked the movie rather, because there was a lot of description in the book that he didn't really care about. And you're not going to get, 20 minutes of that description in the film. They kind of gloss over some of that stuff. So
right. And I mean, if you're a fan of science fiction novels and world building, that's just a very different medium. We've talked about this in terms of comic books and comic book movies, and translating what's totally great in a comic book that seems really weird when you have a live action person in some sort of a spandex suit trying to do it on screen in real New York where somebody's having a coffee and typing on their cell phone. Right. So I think this property has been notoriously difficult over the years because it is one of the seminal science fiction works of our, the last 50, 100 years.
Sure,
it's really something.
I mean, the Dune books are hugely popular.
Yeah, and I'm really specifically referencing the first book, but there are something like 9 of them, or maybe there's 12. I don't know. There's at least 9.
And I feel like if anybody's listened to this podcast before, you'll know that we love Denis Villeneuve.
We love Denis Villeneuve.
If anybody can do Dune, I feel like it's him. But back to...
if anybody can do Dune,
he can do it.
It's that dude.
But back to Drag Me to Hell.
Back to Drag Me to Hell.
So would you recommend this to people?
Yes. And I don't have any asterisk-y caveats.
Yeah, I
Not
feel...
yes, as long as just yes. I mean, it's a horror movie, so if you don't like horror, don't watch it. But
maybe people who the kind of gross out stuff might turn some people off, but
maybe.
But beyond that, yeah,
it's pretty cartoony.
Yeah,
it's not. We say gross out stuff. I mean, there are movies where people get slit open from, groin to throat, and you're kind of like, and it looks really realistic. And this isn't that.
Well, and I don't like, one thing that bothers me in movies that seems to happen a lot. I don't know why, but I don't like to see people vomit, like actual vomiting. And
there's a lot of that.
But this isn't, but it's in a cartoony way. It doesn't seem like real.
Right. People kind of spray green goo.
There's a lot,
almost like Ghostbusters.
There's a lot of stuff, and I don't know if there was some reason for this, but there's a lot of stuff being shoved into her mouth and coming out of her mouth.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a reason for that.
A fly flies down the throat.
I don't know if we talked about that. I don't know if this is when we were recording this time, but so you have this fun movie, but the ending winds up being pretty dark, that she is dragged to hell. And what do you think? Was there something that Raimi was trying to say with that? Was there any kind of a message? Do you think?
I don't know, but now that you point out the like, there's a lot of there's a lot of in and out of the mouth, a lot of ingesting and exgesting or whatever, and and we talked about how this lead character is relatively innocent. And so the whole movie, especially considering the ending, is a series of just violations of this character. And it's not a tree rape, right? We don't see that. It's never overtly sexual, but at one point the old woman shoves her, and this is in a dream sequence, shoves her fist down her throat, like to the shoulder, like, and it's impossible and weird.
Yeah.
But it's an overt physical violation, and I hadn't really put that all together in my mind until you think, well, the end is also a violation. Like, it's a violation of the audience's trust with the character as a proxy. Like, oh, we've been led to believe that now you did what was required of you, and now you're done. Oh no, switcheroo at the last second, and you don't get that either. And I didn't feel this watching it per se, but it does feel a little cruel. Almost any horror movie with a female protagonist who is, being chased and terrorized and abused throughout you can talk about that as misogyny, and what is this, why do we love that as a culture, and why does she represent all of us, or does she, or is she just women and the filmmaker hates women, or I didn't feel that in this. I felt like, that he really shone the spotlight on her, but then at the end, the very last thing he does is she loses.
It felt a lot to me like a Twilight Zone episode or something. I think of one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes. Did you ever see the one with Burgess Meredith where he's the guy who just wants to read all the time?
Right.
So
and finally he does.
So for anybody who hasn't, well, I'm going to spoil
you're going to spoil a Twilight Zone,
like a 60-year-old TV episode or whatever. So Burgess Meredith, Mickey from Rocky, is this guy who he works in a bank, and he just wants to read. He just wishes he had more time to read. There's never enough time to read. And there is a nuclear war, and he's in the bank vault, so he doesn't die in the war, and he comes out and he's the last man on Earth, essentially.
And radioactive fallout is not a thing.
Yeah, radioactive fallout, they ignored that part. But there's no one else around, and he finds this library just full of books. So he finally has his dream scenario. There's nobody else around. He'll have all the time that never mind eating or anything like that. But
or radioactive fallout.
Radioactive fallout. So he'll have all the time in the world to read. And he sits down, he has a big pile of books, and his glasses fall off and break. And so, I love those kind of twisted endings, but...
So it's a world, just to put a pin on it, it's a world without radioactive fallout and without other pairs of glasses.
No, there's no other glasses that he could get. But it's a great ending. So I love those dark endings, but with this movie... I think it's just that you like her so much that you don't.
But even that one's a kind of a monkey paw thing. It's like, be careful what you wish for, because there's other stuff that's tied to that.
Right.
Like, you want this thing. You're like, but I didn't want any of that. And you're like, well, you didn't say that. Like, that comes with it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't do this.
No.
I mean, she just wants the promotion she deserves.
Yeah, exactly. And watching this movie, so this was 2009, so it's like 12 years ago or something like that. And watching it this second time, it made me a little bit sad because Alison Lohman has essentially retired, and she's delightful, I feel. And you just kind of think, like, why did, person X, Y, or Z become a gigantic star and she didn't? She could have been a person in a Marvel movie or whatever, You
don't know.
So
I don't know. I mean, I would say we don't know. Like, we'll never know. Somebody knows.
She knows. Never know. Yeah.
But I don't. But she's great in this.
Justin Long. Yeah, everybody across the board is great, and Raimi is great. In his direction. I hope that he's producing a lot. I don't know what he's directed, kind of in recent years, but it would be great for him to come back to something like this.
Yeah. I don't know either. I don't spend a lot of time doing research on this before we sit down and talk
We
about
just kind of wing it.
It's just our opinions, folks. That's all we got. Do we know what we are going to do for next time?
Well, we had talked about doing Rocky Horror as a Halloween thing, which we were maybe going to do already, but we didn't get around to it. So we can still do that. I don't know if there's anything else that you're interested in.
I think that's a great one to do because you've never seen it.
I've seen. I'm very familiar with
Clips.
it. And I've seen clips, but I don't think I've ever seen it like in one sitting.
Yeah, you gotta.
And it is on. I don't think you have Hulu, but Rocky Horror is on Hulu right now, so I won't have to rent it.
I think we should do that for next time. I don't know if the release of that is going to time right up with Halloween, but it's certainly the month. And there's certainly genre movies that fit with the Halloween theme. So let's stick with that Rocky Horror Picture Show for next time, y'all. If you haven't seen it, take this opportunity to give it a watch because it's a cult classic for a reason.
And I don't know if they're doing midnight screenings. Oh, we keep talking about Evil Dead. I think this already passed because I think it was this week. But they did a 40th anniversary, I think, like 4K in theaters, one night only. Evil Dead thing. It's probably, by the time you hear this it's probably passed.
By the time you hear this, it will already be too late.
The new Evil Dead is one that we ought to do sometime.
Okay. Is it good?
It's kind of brutal. So it's a lot more serious than what the original is.
That's not appealing to me though.
Yeah, I know. But I don't know. We'll think about it.
We'll think about it. Okay. So Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. We got this YouTube thing going on here with now we got visuals.
Yeah, so you can listen to us on all the normal podcast places, or if you like to watch, you can watch us on YouTube.
And I don't even know what that link is, but I assume if you go to YouTube and you search for Chris Talk Movies, you'll find us.
Yes.
I hope that's the case.
Yes.
So now we've posted a visual one for Congo.
Yes.
Have we already posted the other one yet?
By the time
you see this.
Yeah, by the time you see this, we will have our second video.
We'll have posted a second one, which I believe was Shattered. And
which was another fun
third, and I think that we will do our very darndest to give you some sort of...
Yeah, we'll keep doing this.
Eye candy, as it were. Of course. Great. So this is awesome. It's great to see you in person again, my friend.
Yeah.
And Rocky Horror Picture Show for next time, folks. Join us then, and until then, we will talk to you next week. Click.